Good morning and welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church. My name's Diane Alcorn and I am the Membership and Engagement Coordinator here. If this is your first time visiting with us, welcome. We're glad you took the time to join us here. If you'd like more information about our church and our worship community, please feel free and send me an email. In the meantime, again, welcome. We're so glad you took the time to join us.
Welcome to West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church, a spiritual community whose hope is audacious and whose vision is for a more equitable and just world for all. I'm Grace Durfee, Worship Associate for this morning, and joining me are Megan Ross, Director of Religious Education and Engagement, Jen Wynn, Finance Committee Chair, and Christine Salanti, our wonderful tech wizard, making this live stream possible. A very special welcome goes to our guest preacher and musician for this morning, Matt Meyer. Matt is a musician and worship leader who has led hundreds of services for UU congregations across the country. He has a degree in hand drumming and serves as Director of Community Life for Sanctuary Boston. Welcome, Matt. Together, we are pleased to invite you into this space, which is connecting people in Cleveland and beyond to our welcoming community. Often the world is not so welcoming. Often the values of the world are neither loving nor just. So may this worship hour be one where our souls are fed by a wisdom and a passion that remind us that life doesn't have to be that way, that there exists a larger love in every human heart, urging us on to what is better. Let this larger love move in our midst today, and may we be changed by it. A special welcome to you if you're a newcomer to our community, gay or straight, cisgender or transgender, black or brown or white, you are welcome. Our West Shore regulars would love to greet you, and will do that if you indicate on the Facebook chat that you are new or relatively new. If you happen to have any questions and would like to chat with a live person, West Shore's Member and Engagement Coordinator, Diane Alcorn, would love to reach out. Diane's email address is being added to your Facebook chat as we speak.
Good morning. I have just a few announcements for you today. The first is an announcement about 2 fun activities for Easter. The first opportunity is an Easter scavenger hunt that will be here on the church grounds. There's no registration required. You just come to the church between March 28th and April 2nd, follow the clues, and find the Easter bunny. Once you find the bunny, take a picture and send it to me, and you'll get a prize. The second Easter opportunity is an Easter egg hunt that will happen on Saturday, April 3rd from 1 to 2:30 in the afternoon. Registration for this event is required so we can maintain social distancing. Please see the e-news for more details. And lastly, there is still room to register for Starting Point. This class, which will be led by Membership and Engagement Coordinator Diane Alcorn, starts on March 17th and meets every Wednesday for 4 weeks. This class is designed by Soul Matters. Those are the folks that make our Connection Circle materials. And it helps folks explore their own spiritual journey, the journey of Unitarian Universalism, and our journey together. See e-news for more information and for a link to register for this exciting class. Thank you.
Once again, welcome to this new day. Every week, we light our chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. It is a beautiful reminder that no matter how many jarring events might happen over the course of the week, the gathered community that is West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church is a source of stability and meaning we can depend on. In that spirit, we now say our chalice lighting words. This is our chalice. In many separate rooms, we light one flame, flame of passion, flame of compassion, flame of humor, flame of style. We do not accept merely surviving. Let our mission be to thrive. Together in spirit, we are one. Let us bear witness to the unity of our spirit by saying together our unison affirmation words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia y el servicio su ley. Este es nuestro magnífico convenio, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros.
These words adapted from Psalm 98. O sing a new song to the Eternal. Shout praise, all earth, break into music and song. Praise the Eternal with lyre and song. Let the sea and all within it thunder praise, the world and its inhabitants. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing in chorus. O sing a new song to the Eternal. Our opening hymn this morning is Blessed Motion by Annie Zylstra. She wrote this song when she was inspired by the words of Martin Prechtel, who spoke of what it was like to have survived an earthquake in Guatemala. Prechtel spoke of what it was like to have the ground beneath his feet, that which had always been so permanent and so solid, suddenly rise up in motion. He said that the myth of believing in solid ground is a myth believed by those that live on the earth, rather than as a part of it. I know for the last year now I've been constantly searching for some sense of grounding, even as it feels like the ground beneath my feet is constantly shifting. If that's been true for you as well, I invite you into the spirit of this song, to be in motion together with the earth. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. All moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. All moves on. That low part 2 more times. Perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. All moves on in perfect motion. All is change and ever rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground. I saw the ocean in motion, the waves of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground. Until I saw the earth in motion, in the waves of steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believe in solid ground. Until I saw the earth in motion, steady change, and the ever-rolling ocean. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the waves of steady change, and the I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion. Desmond the mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land. Every morning, Desmond would wake with the sunrise and spend the day playing in the meadow. And every evening, Desmond would go to sleep in the middle of that meadow under the beautiful starry sky. One night, though, Desmond awoke when it was still dark out. He tried to roll over to a more comfortable spot, but something wasn't right. Desmond realized that his tail was stuck right to the ground and beginning to throb with pain. He felt behind him, and there was a huge boulder that seemed to have fallen in the middle of the meadow just on his tail. Desmond pushed on the boulder and he tugged on his tail. And he pushed on the boulder and tugged on his tail, and he pushed and tugged and pushed and tugged. And when he was out of breath and had just about given up, he saw a giraffe nearby in the grass. Good news, he thought. "Oh, giraffe," Desmond cried. "It seems that a boulder has fallen in the middle of the meadow just on my tail. I'm stuck and it hurts. Could you please push the boulder just a few inches in the other direction so I could go free?" The giraffe looked at Desmond and laughed the way giraffes do. "Silly mouse," said the giraffe. "That's no boulder. That's an elephant that has fallen asleep just on your tail in the middle of the meadow." "Well, thank goodness," said Desmond, a little relieved. "If you could just wake the elephant gently and ask him to roll over a few inches in the other direction, I could go free." "Well," replied the giraffe, "you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." Desmond replied quietly, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." The giraffe wandered off, and Desmond tried calling out to wake the elephant up, but those giant ears were just too far away on the other side of that giant elephant body. So again, Desmond pushed on the elephant and tugged on his tail, and he pushed and tugged and pushed and tugged. When he was out of breath and had just about given up again, he saw a gazelle wander by. "Oh, gazelle," he cried. "Oh, gazelle, it seems that an elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. I'm stuck and it hurts. I wonder if you could gently wake him up and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction so I could get free." "Well," said the gazelle, "you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like this." Desmond replied almost to himself this time, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." Desmond tried again to call out to the elephant. He tried again to push the animal away. He tried again and again to tug his little tail free, but it was no use. When he was out of breath and had just about given up for the last time, he saw another mouse wander through the meadow. Desmond called out, and the mouse scurried over and introduced himself. "My name is Nelson. Nelson, this giant elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. I wonder if you might run over and call out to his giant elephant ears and ask him to roll over just a few inches in the other direction so I could go free." "Of course," said Nelson. Nelson ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body, and he called up to those giant elephant ears at the top of that giant elephant head. But the elephant didn't budge. The elephant heard Nelson's small voice far away, but just felt too comfortable to move. Nelson ran back to Desmond and, a little out of breath, said, "I have an idea. Stay right here." He ran off, leaving a confused look on Desmond's face. A little while later, though, Desmond saw Nelson emerge through the tall grass, and he wasn't alone. Nelson had found 3 mouse friends to help him, and each of them had found another 3 friends. The whole group of them ran over to that giant head at the other end of that giant elephant, and one mouse scrambled up on the shoulders of another, and another mouse scrambled up on her shoulders, and one after another they climbed up, until the whole group of them had formed a long mouse ladder right up the side of that elephant. At last, Nelson climbed up the shoulders of all of his mouse friends, one on top of the other, until he was all the way on top of that giant elephant head, standing right next to that giant elephant ear. "Excuse me," he called out right into that ear. "It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. I wonder if you could just roll over a few inches in the other direction so he could go free." The giant elephant made a low groan. "Umph. I'm comfortable just where I am. Go away." So Nelson asked more of his mouse friends to climb up. One by one, they helped each other up the side of that elephant. One by one, they called out into that giant ear on top of that giant elephant head, and the elephant made a low groan again. "Umph. I'm comfortable just where I am. Go away." But then Nelson had an idea. He whispered to the mice, and then all at once together they yelled right into that ear, "Excuse us. It seems you've fallen asleep on our friend's tail in the middle of this meadow. Roll over just a few inches in the other direction so he could go free." This time, all of those voices together right next to his ear were just too loud to ignore. "I was comfortable where I was, but I'll move over if you just agree to stop making such a racket," the elephant cried out. And then the elephant rolled over just a few inches in the other direction. Nelson and the other mice climbed up, helped each other back down, and Desmond was finally free. Together they spent the rest of the day playing in the middle of that beautiful meadow. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have taken sides with the oppressor. If an elephant is standing on the tail of a mouse, the mouse will never appreciate your neutrality." As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to be in covenant together, to be in relationship together, to work together to make the world a better place. We've articulated a vision of justice and equity and compassion, and we've named that vision in our principles and in our communities. And so sometimes we take sides for justice. We take sides for equity and for compassion. Sometimes, perhaps even always, we work together to side with love. Channels for the streams of love, that they may broadly run, and love
The practice of writing, for me, involves both ease and effort. Throughout school, I usually did well on my papers, but I always struggled to write them. Later, to promote my coaching work and stay in touch with my network, I stuck with the commitment of writing a monthly newsletter for 17 years. Believe me, writing was not always easy. I always thought it would be ideal to have a stockpile of newsletters ready to publish, but that wasn't how I rolled. I had to wait for inspiration to strike. There were many occasions when it would be nearly the end of the month and I'd still have no idea what to write about. The whole process was easier if I didn't let myself get too stressed about deadline pressure. After all, it was self-imposed. I found if I relaxed and trusted, inevitably a topic would surface. I often found inspiration from the lessons in personal challenges or in the environment around me. For instance, I'd find a metaphor in nature, a billboard, or the chorus of a song. Once I was interested and enthusiastic about a topic, often I would wake up the next morning with what I call the divine download. In a yoga class this week, my teacher mentioned how we receive divine downloads so that we can create divine uploads, sharing inspiring messages with others. That's the exact process that describes my writing practice at its best. When this happens, I wake up early with ideas bursting forth like popcorn. I have learned to work with the muse by grabbing my journal and capturing the ideas as they come. Creation tends to be messy, and since my mind often doesn't follow a linear process, I find it effective to use a mind mapping technique to note my thoughts. Using this spider web-like approach, I'll put my topic in a circle in the center of the page, with main ideas branching off of it like spokes, and then subtopics coming off of them. If a fully formed sentence or phrase occurs to me, I write that down too. Then later, I put the spokes into order and begin the actual writing process. Sometimes the actual process of writing flows, and other times it's agonizingly slow. My process is impeded when, instead of first getting the words down into a rough draft, I try to craft perfectly turned phrases as I'm writing. It's much more enjoyable and efficient when I remember to write first and polish and refine later. Writing is like a muscle. When you're using it regularly, it stays strong and supple. For many years, I engaged with the practice of morning pages, as Julia Cameron recommends in The Artist Way. First thing in the morning, before getting out of bed, I'd grab my journal and fill several pages, writing down fragments of dreams, to-do list, holiday menus, whatever was on my mind. This kept my writing muscles limber. Over time, I amassed a lot of content writing my monthly newsletters, much of which made its way into my book, Balance with Grace, Celebrate the Kaleidoscope of Life, which I self-published in 2008. Even with plenty of material already written, finishing that book was laborious. Honestly, it was harder than my 2 experiences with natural childbirth. My interest in writing began to wane after this exhausting effort. After a few more years, I moved to a shorter blog format and relaxed my regular schedule of publishing. My writing slowed to a trickle and eventually stopped. I even stopped journaling. But ever since becoming a worship associate this past September, I have been re-engaging with the practice of writing. Thankfully, some muscle memory has kicked in to create some ease in writing a reflection every 5 or 6 weeks or so. It really helps that I'm given the sermon topic, have a chance to chat with Reverend Anthony about the direction of my reflection, and don't have to come up with a title. Thankfully, divine downloads still come in to give me ideas. The writing itself is still somewhat of an effort, but I am willing to keep practicing.
Hi, I'm Wynn. I've been a member of West Shore Church since 2007. I typically talk about pledging in my role as the church's Finance Committee chairperson and the role of pledging and funding our $800,000 annual budget that keeps the church open and operating. I'm grateful that today I get to tell you about my own personal experience with pledging and giving back to our church. I think it's important to reflect on how pledging can help you take ownership in the church and help you evolve personally and as a church member. I think there's a lot of truth to the phrase, the more you give, the more you get. When you pledge, you're not only giving to the church as a financial entity, you're investing in the ways and means for your own personal development. I'd like to share with you the story of my family's own personal experience with our decision to become members and the pledge process and what it means to me. When my husband Laird and I started to attend church, our children were around ages 3 and 5. We struggled with what it meant to be members versus just attending. It gradually became evident to us that being members gave us ownership and a place in the church community. If we became members, we felt we could call it our church. Well, that's an oversimplified version of the story as it relates to our decision to become members. In reality, it was not easy for me to decide to pledge as a part of that decision of membership. At the time, I came from a place of scarcity and approached our family's decision-making from never having enough. I looked at pledging as an obligation and not an opportunity. When we started to give what little I thought we had, I started to see the abundance of what we truly had and what we were being provided in return. We got involved in things and took on roles that I never would have had the courage to do outside of church. It's a safe haven to try something new. You can't find a more supportive group of people than in this church. My husband Laird and I became the teachers for the pre-kindergarten classroom. And I felt a strong attachment to the Our Whole Lives, or OWL program, and I took intense training to become certified to teach human sexuality to high school students and to facilitate the adult class. This was way outside my comfort zone. I grew up in a house where body parts were not recognized and sexuality was not embraced. And here I was learning how to teach and learning how to facilitate conversations about a very delicate subject matter. Among other things, I went on to take a role on the board, and this is my second run on the Finance Committee. The challenges in interpersonal development I experienced as the board president built character and patience. I developed skills that I now use in all other parts of my life outside church. I strongly believe that my church experiences contributed to my ability to receive a promotion at work and to be more successful in my professional life. And having these experiences and seeing this self-transformation helped me to come from a place of abundance and not scarcity. I can see now that giving results in more giving. And it's intuitive for me to take the value of pledging and translate it into dollars and measurable worth, as I think I just did for you. And I told you about the training I received, the skills I built in exchange for my pledge and commitment to the church. And these are practical experiences that came to mind when I started to think about what to say to you today. And they truly are valuable to me, not because I would have paid good money for this training and leadership experience outside of church. I'd like to also tell you about the value of church membership and belonging that's even more important to me than training and skill building. Remember I mentioned the safe haven and support I felt when I was doing the training and teaching and facilitating board governance? Well, that safety net and support was also there with me and my family when our son Jack struggled with mental illness and when my father died. I have danced wildly and sang freely with my fellow Free Spirit band groupies down the aisles of the sanctuary. I have cried openly and deeply in the pews during intense moments of connection with Reverend Anthony's sermons. And I've placed hundreds of stones in the sanctuary sand to send love and support and energy through the universe to my loved ones during our congregational ritual to acknowledge all that is our lives. These are the priceless experiences that create a stronger connection for ourselves to the church and to each other. Please continue to be connected and committed as we start the new pledge drive. And now, if you'd like to offer West Shore a special financial gift, please follow the text instructions on your screen.
Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. Listen, my people, we bring the power. La libertad es la única bandera. Liberty is the only flag. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Oye, mi gente, traemos la fuerza. La libertad es la única bandera. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. Listen, my people, my condor, my eagle. No human being can ever be illegal. No human being These words come to us from Mickey Scott Bay Jones in her Invitation to Brave Space. Together we will create brave space, because there is no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and more love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. I invite you to take a moment to be present in your body. Take a moment to be present with yourself. For now, at least, there is nowhere else you need to be. There is nothing else to be done but to be here. Spirit of love that is within us and between us, be with us this morning as we are with each other, connecting heart to heart and screen to screen, reaching out though we are far apart. Love, be with us as we are with each other, bringing our whole complicated selves, our whole complex stories. We are practicing being the person we would like to be. We are practicing being in community. We are practicing building the world that we have imagined, a world envisioned in our hearts and articulated in our principles. But the world we would imagine for ourselves is far from the world we see around us. Spirit, the person we would like ourselves to be can feel too far from the person we are. Be with us as we are with each other in the middle, in the distance between. Be with us as we are with each other, grieving the losses, mourning the difficulties, the struggles, the fragility of our bodies, of our society. And Spirit, be with us as we are with each other also in the small celebrations, the small glad joys of the here and the now, the daily gratitudes of our daily lives. Spirit, be with us as we hold each other in the all of it, the joys and the sorrows, the struggles and the celebrations, the griefs and the gratitudes. May it be so, and Amen. I start nearly every day with a to-do list, usually scribbled on a post-it note on the corner of my desk. Between you and me, it's usually an overly ambitious to-do list. And one thing in particular that I struggle to check off the list most days is making time for writing. It's not that I'm not dedicated. I'm so dedicated to being a writer that every day I put it on the list. I'm so dedicated that every day I read books about writing and collect story ideas and quotes and prompts so that when I do write, I'll have lots of inspiration. I'm so dedicated that every day I work on other things and I finish other pressing commitments so that eventually I'll have lots of time to write. I'm so dedicated that certainly one of these days I'll start writing. One of my favorite authors, Anne Lamott, talks about this, about how hard it is in fact to just sit down every day and put your butt in the chair and write. She says, "The discouraging voices will hound you. This is all piffle," they will say. And they might be right. What you are doing may just be practice, but this is how you're going to get better. Some of the best writing advice I ever got was from a teacher who told me, for now, take a few minutes and don't write, but just write what you would write if you were going to write. I sometimes feel like in all the years since I've gotten that advice, I haven't written anything since, but I have written a lot about what I would write if I did. You might call this the practice of practicing, learning how to practice. The problem is that the finished product we might imagine for ourselves can feel too far from where we're starting. The person we would like ourselves to be can sometimes feel so far from the person we see in the mirror every day. The world as we would like it to be can feel impossibly far from the headlines we read in the news every morning. The demons of perfectionism stand in the way of good writing, just as they stand in the way of risk-taking in general, creative risk-taking in particular. And this is unfortunate because we know that creating a life for ourselves that doesn't yet exist requires some creative risk-taking. Particularly in uncertain and anxious times such as these, just showing up as your best self every day requires setting aside those discouraging voices that hound us. And on many days, well, just imagining a world of justice and equity and compassion, it can feel so far beyond any horizon that we can see that it means setting aside those voices that show up and say your efforts are just piffle. When the demons of perfectionism show up like this, I try to practice the practicing of showing up for myself and for others. Musicians know something about practicing. One of the requirements for all students at Berklee College of Music, where I attended years ago, is 4 semesters of ear training. Ear training is learning to sight sing music just by reading the notes on a page, and learning to write down and transcribe the music just by listening to a song. Now, when I began school, I certainly knew that there were people who were capable of this kind of magic, but it seemed like some kind of Harry Potter nonsense to me. Like, you may as well ask me to sit at my desk and use my conductor's baton to turn the desk into a toad. I remember our first day of ear training class as there was a sort of nervous silence among us new students. Well, silence actually except for one student who was quite vocal in his nervousness. This one student interrupted the teacher in the first few minutes of the very first day to share that he was worried the class was going to be too advanced for him. He wanted to make it clear that he knew, in fact, not a single thing about ear training. The teacher kindly paused his introductions to explain that we'd all taken entrance exams and he was sure we'd been placed in the appropriate class. The teacher tried to continue but was interrupted again. Well, the man said, "Is this the very lowest class though? Because I need to be in the very lowest class." Some of the students in the class giggled a little bit, and you could tell our poor teacher looked around the room a little sheepishly, not really wanting to answer that yes, we were in fact a class of the most very basic students. "Well," he said, "it is Ear Training 101, so it is the lowest. There is, I guess, a class for people that have previously failed the 101, but you all are just about the lowest." Now, while some of the other students giggled, I was actually kind of glad that someone was questioning what felt to me like the absurd notion that sight singing even could be taught. I don't know what happened next for that student, but he never came back to our class. Not because anything we did on that first day was in fact too hard for him, I'm sure of it, but because I think he lacked a belief that improvement was even possible. I kept going, thinking that, well, if generations of students have done this before, it must be possible somehow, even if I personally can't see the way forward. And I made a commitment to at least practice the material. I've always remembered this other student, though, who gave up before he started. It's not just that he didn't try to become a master at ear training. It's that he didn't even try the practicing of it, which always struck me as the real loss. When discouraging voices hound me, I sometimes think of him, and I remind myself that maybe, for now, the work I'm doing is just practice. But practice is how I'm going to get better. This pandemic arrived nearly a year ago, and it has been a difficult year to be sure. A time of constant adaptation, of the ground shifting beneath us constantly. I imagine that the future, much like this past year, will be a time of learning and relearning new ways of being together, of organizing our days differently, organizing our people differently, all over again. This is a time of adaptation, and it is also a time of imagination. This is a time as we reorganize ourselves and reorganize our society. This is a time for those in power, which in some ways is all of us, to learn to play some different roles in our communities, to learn some new tunes. Particularly for white folks, this is a time to practice some new skills and learn to play some new roles in our community, a time for listening in deeper ways we haven't always done so well before, and having some hard conversations we haven't yet practiced enough. Fellow white folks, when you hear people of color making demands these days, now is a good time to practice amplifying those voices that fight to be heard elsewhere, by repeating them in calls to your representatives and colleagues and family. If you inherited wealth that was accumulated in a time of systematic racial segregation, which is true of all wealth in this country, now is a good time to practice giving it away. If your muscle memory has been to call the police when something goes wrong, now is the time to practice something different, building new skills for community safety. I won't all of a sudden do all of these things, but I will practice the doing of them. Musicians know as well as anyone that muscle memory is very real. That consistent practicing changes the very structure of our brains, rewiring our circuitry, forging new connections and new possibilities. No one is born a musician. Musicians are just the ones that learned how to practice. Even songbirds need elder birds to sing to them and teach them their tunes. Practice doesn't make music perfect, but it makes music possible. And so let us practice the practicing together, showing up for ourselves and each other to build a new world of justice and equity and compassion. Practice won't make the world perfect, but it makes a better world possible. Someday I want to be a true expert in justice and compassion. Someday I want to be well practiced at creating that brave space even when there's no such thing as safe space. Someday I want to be masterful at amplifying the voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. And someday I want to be skillful at speaking more truth and more love. Someday I want to be part of transforming our so-called justice system that has hurt so many so deeply. I want to be part of shifting our education system that so far has fast-tracked some to college and sent others to prison. And I want to be part of shifting our energy sector that has been working overtime to overheat our planet. These are daunting tasks, to be sure. On most days, learning to transcribe a symphony seems more manageable. But that's okay, because for now, I don't have to do all of those things. I just need to practice doing what I would do if I were doing them. So dear ones, don't promise to be your best self today. Just practice being the person you would be if you are being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such things. You have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We all have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. So let us start together. Let us grow together. And let us practice together. May it be so, and may we make it so. This song was written by Sarah Lynch Thomason, a climate justice activist in Appalachia. This song, like I think the best music and perhaps like the best faith communities, calls us not to turn away from the crises of our times, but to face the hard and difficult things together and to move forward together. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know. There are more fires burning, they will find their way to me. There are more fires burning, this I know, this I know. There are more fires burning, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know. There are more mountains falling, they will find their way to me. There are more mountains falling, this I know, this I know. There are more mountains falling, this I know. I will wade through the water, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the water, this I know. I will wade through the water when they find their way to me. I will wade through the waters, this I know, this I know. I will wade through the waters, this I know. I will walk through the fire, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know. I will walk through the fires when they find their way to me. I will walk through the fires, this I know, this I know. I will walk through the fires, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains when they find their way to me. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know, this I know. I will rebuild the mountains, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know. There are more waters rising, they will find their way to me. There are more waters rising, this I know, this I know. There are more waters rising, this I know.
Now bring your chalice close to extinguish it, as I extinguish the chalice here. We extinguish our flames, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again. Just a reminder that we will have coffee hour starting at 11:30 following the service on Zoom.
Beloveds, don't promise to be your best self today. Just be the person you would be if you were practicing being your best self. Don't try to rebuild a new world in the image of love this week. Just practice doing what you would do if you had committed to such beautiful things. You have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow, and so let us start together and grow together, and let us practice together. Go in peace, go in love, and go and be blessed as you are a blessing to others.